Guys, the worst, least educated, most partisan judge on the Supreme Court just opened herself up to impeachment with the most blatant violation of an oath that I've seen since Boasberg, which is really not that long ago, actually.
We begin today with bracing warnings about Donald Trump's assault on constitutional limits and a sitting Supreme Court justice making a rare public statement about the impact on the judiciary. Without directly naming Trump, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson appeared to denounce the administration's repeated attacks on judges.
And what she means by denouncing attacks on the judiciary is actually openly endorsing judicial activism. Across the nation, judges are facing increased threats of not only physical violence, but also professional retaliation just for doing our jobs. And the attacks are not random. They seem designed to intimidate those of us who serve in this critical capacity. The threats and harassment are attacks on our democracy, on our system of government, and ultimately they risk undermining our Constitution and rule of law. To all judges across the country that are standing up to President Trump, I applaud your raw courage and I urge you to keep going, keep doing what is right for our country, and I do believe history will vindicate your service. She's not making those comments in a vacuum. She's making those comments in the context of Boasberg's illegal TROs, Zenus's illegal TROs, and the courts doing everything they can to stop a constitutional and classically liberal agenda to reduce the size of government and bring our country back into the rule of law. It's not just in speeches. She's taking this same energy to the courtroom. I want you guys to hear what Thomas Sowell has to say about judicial activism, and tell me in the comments if this applies to what we're dealing with right now.
Judicial activism is a fancy phrase for a very plain thing. When the law says A and the judge wants it to mean Z, he interprets it as meaning Z. Deep thinkers may call that judicial activism. Back where I come from, we call it lying. The problem is not that the judges don't know what the rules are, but that they don't want to follow them. The ploy is to say that no one knows exactly what is meant by constitutional phrases like due process or cruel and unusual punishment. This is the game that Supreme Court Justice William Brennan played when he said, "We cannot know exactly what the framers thought cruel and unusual punishments were," as he reversed a death penalty decision as unconstitutional. What the framers of the Constitution clearly did not mean was the death penalty. They explicitly mentioned the death penalty in other parts of that document.
Tell me, guys, do the Supreme Court issues of Thomas Sowell's era remind you of anything we're dealing with today?
I can report that I was at that event last night, and the crowd was keenly focused on the justice's words.
Okay, so it was the kind of exclusive event that an MSNBC host would be invited to.
Jackson had been slated to give brief remarks before settling into a longer conversation with a sitting judge about her recent memoir. She wound up speaking for a little over a quarter of an hour.
A quarter of an hour praising judges that violated the law according to the Supreme Court. A quarter of an hour endorsing ideological resistance while she's a sitting member of that same Supreme Court. And she's demonstrated time and time again that she's not able to leave her bias at the door of her courtroom. Remember last week when she was debating parents' lawyers about whether or not their kids should be exposed to explicit materials in the school curriculums?
I guess I'm struggling to see how it burdens a parent's religious exercise if the school teaches something that the parent disagrees with. You have a choice. You don't have to send your kid to that school. You can put them in another situation.
This book was on a stand. I'd like to read you a page. My back over my hips as I asked if we should take our clothes off. When I rented it out to show my dad it, the librarian asked if I wanted more and if I wanted a graphic novel version.
What's confusing to me and hard, really hard in this situation is that we have a lot of sincerely held beliefs and concerns and children and principles, and I see all of those things, and so really want to be careful about making the pronouncement that relates to this.
You want to be careful about allowing parents to opt out of a sexual curriculum in school? Just to be safe, we'd better lean towards the side of forcing people to comply? I don't even think she believes the crap coming out of her mouth right now, to be honest with you.
I don't understand how we can do it on this record because we can't know. We don't at this moment, based on the record you've provided, know that these books aren't just sitting on the shelves.
I disagree, Your Honor. The record is undisputed. The Court of Appeals did not dispute that some of the books have to be used, and we have all of the teacher's instructions that the board's not disputed.
I understand that, but the Fourth Circuit made a ruling that we don't know, quote, what any child has been taught in conjunction with their use.
I don't think there's any way you can argue that Ketanji Brown Jackson is actually qualified to be on that Supreme Court bench. This was heard during the confirmation hearing.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No,
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
of-
Lady, what are you talking about? Biologists have already gone and defined it for us. I think this is impeachable. I think she's crossed the line from her pattern of behavior combined with how she just overtly crossed the line with this speech in Puerto Rico, advocating for basically judicial resistance outside of their capacity under law. What do you guys think? When we get Congress in line come 2026, you think we got a good chance at impeaching this lady? I don't think there's any arguing the fact that she's just straight up abandoned impartiality at this point. Hey, thank you so much for joining me, guys. You rock. I appreciate you, and I'm gonna see you on the next one.